The floodgates are open, the embargo about Assassin's Creed Mirage is lifted, and finally we are able to discuss everything we know about the game and show you a ton of new gameplay along with our impressions, but there is so much to discuss that in today's video we won't be able to discuss everything that we have found and seen in our recent almost 4 hours of hands-on time with Mirage. It is too much and we can't fit it in a single video because we got to test 3 main sections of the game. The first one was part of the prologue. It was set in the village of Anbar and it featured Basim in his street thief years. The second one was set in Alamut during Basim's apprenticeship with the Hidden Ones. And the third one was set in Baghdad with Basim being a fully fledged Hidden One and taking head-on an investigation in the Order of the Ancient scheming in the Kark district. So yeah, there's too much to discuss and too little time, so today we're going to try our best to discuss the main selling points of the game, the main pillars if you will, of course sharing our impressions about what we've seen, and also trying to answer some of the questions and requests that have been posed by our members, the ATA Insiders. Once again, thank you so much for the support, and also our community on Discord, while in the coming days we're going to try and have a deep dive into Mirage's game world, its side activities, and so on. Alright, let's talk about the main pillars, the main selling points of the game. And let's start with parkour. Parkour. I have mixed feelings about this. The weirdest of feelings. When I played the game for a quite long period of time, it still felt heavy, better than Valhalla for sure, but still not quite there yet. Then the day after, I had a look at the footage and it feels much better. It looks faster, more agile, with fewer idle moments. Like I said, it's a strange feeling, but still it is improved from Valhalla. All things considered, of course, don't expect radical changes. So it is a little better, even though the so-called parkour ingredients are not so diversified. They have been mentioned from the start of the campaign: elevators, corner swings, and pole vaults, but that's it. There aren't other ingredients or interactable elements for what concerns parkour. Still, when you do find them in the city, they are quite useful, especially if you are running away from enemies and need to break their line of sight. Instead, what really shines about parkour in Mirage is the design of the world, of Baghdad as a city, but also the other villages as well. It is amazing. There is much more verticality and especially a much higher density of buildings, which means there are so many more parkour paths, so many directions that can be taken while staying on the rooftops or entering the buildings through windows without ever touching the ground. And like I said, it's not just Baghdad. You can feel that in Anbar as well, the exact moment you step outside Basim's hideout at the start of the game, and even in Alamut, which of course is the home of the Hidden Ones. It would feel weird if it weren't the case. Plus, while side ejects and back ejects aren't really there, sorry Dr. Side Eject, you asked about them but I can't bring good news about them, there is at least some kind of agency in the parkour action based on whether you hold or not the parkour button in terms of extending your jumps. So yeah, like I said, parkour is not quite there yet, but it's still pretty enjoyable, especially because of the world design and scenery. Now let's move to stealth, which was something I was really looking forward to try, and I'm happy that many of you, including our insider Hernan, asked about it because I have some pretty good news. I would say stealth did pass the test. Gone are the moments where you were detected by guards for unknown and frustrating reasons. Gone are the moments where social stealth was forgotten or added but did not work or was impractical. Gone are also the times where stealth was so penalized or wasn't the focus of the game that going in guns a-blazing was the most efficient, sometimes the only viable approach. So let's have a look at some of the systems that actually are bringing back the stealthy way to the spotlight. And let's start with what I deem to be one of the most important and useful stealthy features in the game, which is pickpocketing. I hope this surprised you as it surprised me when I played. As we already mentioned, pickpocketing is back in Mirage, not only as a nod to the classic games, but also with a more substantial presence. First of all, because there is going to be a dedicated minigame to it, where you have to press a button at the right time when the indicator is in the proper area in order to pickpocket successfully. But more importantly, pickpocketing in Mirage will probably be way more important than in any other game of the franchise because of the things that you can steal, which aren't going to be just money and trinkets as it's been the case in pretty much every other game of the franchise. In fact, through Eagle Vision we'll be able to see if NPCs are carrying pouches with them, and if they do, chances are we might get something interesting ranging from money and trinkets, yes, to the so-called Derwishes artifacts, which are artifacts that we supposedly need to return to Derwish, and also to tokens. The tokens, this new currency introduced with Mirage, they are what makes pickpocketing worth your time. We're going to talk about them more in detail at a later stage, but basically they allow you to bribe NPCs and story characters into doing a wide variety of things for you, such as causing distractions, buying maps, obtaining information, silence the town criers, and even cause groups of people to walk into restricted areas so you can walk with them undetected. Tokens can also be obtained in other ways, such as completing Hidden Ones contracts and opening chests, but both of them are limited in the game and not continuously generated, which is why pickpocketing becomes the only way to obtain this very important currency, so it will really be important to always have some with us. Social stealth will also be back in the game, not only in the form of crowd blending or sitting on benches to avoid being spotted, but also in a more active or triggered form where we can cause groups of merchants to walk inside the restricted areas by bribing them through tokens, as we mentioned earlier, even though we weren't able to test this specific feature during our time with the game. The contextual crowd blending though is very much as was in the original games. It can happen at any time where at least 3 civilians are nearby, even with moving NPCs or standing ones, and it allows Basim to not be spotted, even during eavesdropping sessions, which are also back in the game, but I promise, those aren't bad either. And at last, after so much time, I was so excited about this, we could also test the bench assassination with the classic, traditional animation of Basim sitting the assassinated guard on the bench before leaving. As we said, you can also cause distractions by using tokens to bribe musicians into playing music and attract guards, that's what the musical note icon was about on the map, or to hire mercenaries to attack guards so you can sneak in an area undetected. Another element concerns the guards, who will now have vision cones that will help us understand where they are looking, so we can factor that in within our strategy. And on the topic of enemies, they can also be tagged by using our Eagle and Kidu, as it was in the past games of the franchise, which will help us understand where the enemies are within a fort we have to infiltrate. Mirage will also bring back the last known position mechanic, which is going to visually tell us when we break the line of sight with pursuing guards, and thus know where they are going to look for us, and thus organize our strategy accordingly. And finally, something I absolutely wasn't expecting. Some of the costumes that we can find in the world, not the outfits, but the visual overlays that we can apply over them as part of the transmog system, some of the costumes, I was saying, can act as disguises, which can actually reduce detection in specific locations tied to that specific costume, which seems the closest addition in a mainline Assassin's Creed game to the amazing persona system from Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation, where main character Aveline could change her outfit to better blend in within environments and people, and here in Mirage 2 that seems to be the case, and sadly we weren't able to test this, so I can't wait to see this specific disguise feature in action when the game is released. So yeah, you can see how much work went into the game, and especially into the stealth aspect. It seems that this aspect of Assassin's Creed is properly back, but I'll wait for your opinions when the game releases to know if you guys agree with me. The one system that is the most intrinsically tied to stealth is the notoriety system. As a proper assassin simulation, committing illegal actions will get Basim noticed by the crowds and especially by the guards. Within the game, it's best if Basim doesn't get spotted not only by enemies but also by NPCs and passersby as he assassinates guards, otherwise the notoriety level will raise and things are going to get complicated. In more tangible terms, the game provides a notoriety gauge that increases based on how serious our transgression is. Level 1 will cause civilians to recognize Basim and call guards to go and get him. When this happens, wanted posters will appear around Baghdad, which also justifies why civilians recognize him, and of course will be able to tear them off to lower our notoriety. Level 2 will make guards more likely to detect us. Archers will start patrolling rooftops and civilians will report Basim even more. In this occasion, according to the game's database, Basim's wanted posters will actually attract passersby who will gather around them. And finally, level 3, which is the highest one, will cause the huge and massed Shakiria enemies to roam the city and hunt Basim. These Shakiria enemies especially will keep hunting Basim and will prove very tough to beat, but also standard guards and even civilians will be very likely to spot our main character, so we'll have to be very careful in such situation. In all of this, the so-called Munadi, that is, the town criers, will also appear around the city, and Basim will be able to lower his notoriety level by bribing them through the use of the so-called power tokens. Another huge addition to Mirage and callback to the original games are the Assassin's tools, which are an essential element both for our stealth and assassination approaches. They are consumables, as in, apart from the torch, you're going to need to replenish them by buying them or by finding them in the world, especially in military locations, in one of the pretty frequent restocking chests. During our time with the game, we were only able to test 3 tools, that is the smoke bombs, the noisemakers, and the throwing knives, and the torch, which is very similar to its Valhalla counterpart, but let's have a look at all of them nonetheless. Smoke bombs are and have always been my favorite side tool in the Assassin's Creed games. They basically create a puff of smoke, which in Mirage will have several different types of color based on the different effects and modifiers that they can have, more on that later, and this smoke temporarily incapacitates enemies and also doesn't allow them to see you while you are walking within it. This makes the smoke bombs useful both in a defensive way, stopping the guards while we are trying to hide, but also in an attacking way, incapacitating guards before assassinating them and vanishing, which is something I was hoping to see in the game, and it delivered properly. Throwing knives are pretty much self-explanatory. These are knives we can throw at enemies from a distance to damage or kill them. They essentially replace the bow and arrows in the game, to the point where one of the skills in the game allows to throw them in mid-air while slowing time, just as it happened for the bow in the last few AC RPG games. I usually don't use throwing knives in Assassin's Creed very often, but I did find myself using them now that they are basically the only ranged weapon that causes damage in the game. The only issue I had with it is that the aiming cursor is not fully free. If close to a target, it magnetizes itself towards it, which is usually very helpful with standing targets, but it can be a pain with moving targets, especially if there's 2 or more of them around the aiming area. The third tool we tested was the noisemaker, and it basically creates an exploding sound that attracts guards where you are throwing it, so as to distract them while you sneak by, or to gather them where you're going to assassinate them. The other 2 tools that we weren't able to test in the demo are the trap or mine, which is like a proximity mine that generates gas or other effects when guards get close to it, and the blow dart, which can cause specific effects upon guards, like causing them to fall asleep or to go berserk. Tools can also be unlocked, enhanced, and customized within the Hidden Ones bureaus in Baghdad by visiting the Banu Musa. Each tool will have 3 enhancement tiers, which can be unlocked by using the upgrade materials at our disposal, and for each tier, players will be able to select only 1 out of 2 or 3 available effects. Once the enhancement tier of a specific tool is unlocked, players will be able to visit a Banu Musa in any given bureau to choose or change which effect to apply to that tool from that specific tier. Tier 1 is similar for all tools and it focuses on performance. Within it, players will be able to choose between increasing the quantity of the ammunitions, the range of the tool, or its duration. Tiers 2 and 3 instead are all about effects, and we can have a full rundown of the available effects, at least of the tools that were available to us during our playthrough. Smoke bombs can be silent. They can be turned into healing vapors for Basim or choking fumes for enemies. They can cause guards to forget about Basim because of the mind wipe effect, and they can even be flammable if thrown or dropped against flames. Noisemakers can distract enemies for a longer period of time, they can lower their defense and turn into incendiary devices too, but they can also scare guards, and they can even cause a shockwave of sorts that stuns nearby enemies and destroys cages, vases, and fragile walls. And finally, the throwing knives, which can apply poison, stagger enemies, and allow for charged throws, but can also corrode bodies and cause them to disappear, and even pierce heavy armor for bigger enemies. And finally, let's talk about Assassinations. The game provides a variety of different types of assassination moves, as we have already seen throughout the campaign, many of which are part of the standard moveset of an assassin since the franchise started back in 2007. along with the standard walking and running assassinations, air assassinations, ledge assassinations, and assassinations from a haystack. We have also tested the assassinations from the hidden doors, which work properly coupled with a whistle to attract guards close to Basim, and the assassinations from the rooftop gardens, another returning element which was interesting to see. Although I sometimes had issues with the camera while hiding in them, it was too zoomed in and didn't allow to see the guards walking by. And finally, as I mentioned earlier, we were able to test the bench assassination and it felt so good. It provides the same cool feeling from the original games where you do the kill, sit the guard down and walk away amidst the crowd who only later realizes what happens. I am so excited to see this back in action. The game will also provide the so-called Assassin's Focus feature that can only be triggered when out of conflict, and as you may know, it allows to select as many nearby guards as the available chunks in the dedicated gauge and assassinate them in succession. In my opinion, this is an overpowered ability. Once you can kill more than 2 guards, it can almost allow you to wipe small areas of outposts or forts in an instant. But at the same time, it's not something you can use at will. Its gauge must be refueled by doing standard stealth assassinations, so I guess that compensates it a little bit. I guess that boils down to anyone's approach to the Assassin's Creed games, and it's an additional option that doesn't harm anyone, other than the guards maybe, and it looks cool, especially now that it has those animus effects. But the assassinations are not only fun per se, they can be part of a strategy as they can be combined with the use of tools, and this was something I was really looking forward to try. Being able to use tools to manipulate the guards into going where I wanted, then disabling or distracting them, and then assassinating them before vanishing really was the best feeling. And finally, for today at least, I just wanted to spare a few words for the investigation-like approach to the main missions and story, and the black box assassination missions, which are also topics that our community has asked us about so much. Within Mirage, Basim will start each of the main missions that will lead to the assassination of the members of the Order of the Ancients from a Hidden Ones bureau. Each of these main missions, or it's best to call them investigations, will be tracked in the investigation board or investigation menu, which is a replacement of the quest log from the previous games, and at the same time it's a sort of mixture with the Order of the Ancients and Cult of Cosmos pages from Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Odyssey, in that here we are going to keep track of the main Order of the Ancients targets we're hunting, the clues and information we have found about them, and the Hidden Ones bureaus that each mission is tied to, while also tracking the side missions that are still one way or another connected to the main ones and the contracts provided at the Hidden Ones bureaus. The game will feature 4 Hidden Ones bureaus in Baghdad, which means 4 different main investigations, each ending with a black box mission, plus the hunt for the head of the Order, and the black box missions themselves are now a recurring and fun element of Assassin's Creed in general. They are these huge assassination missions where Basim will end up in a dedicated area of the map. He will have a target to assassinate and will have to look for and make use of the various opportunities provided to him by the environment and the characters within it in order to actually find his target, assassinate them, and then flee the scene. And I have to say, I did test for more than an hour just a chunk of the investigation and the black box mission in the Kark district, and they can be both fascinating and satisfying, even though I had a few gripes here and there with some fetch quests that were nested within the investigation. Nonetheless, the feeling of going within the bazaar, hide amidst the crowd to find information about my target, exploiting opportunities and then going for it before vanishing was the best feeling, especially for an old grumpy hardcore fan like me. To me, at least for the aspect that we discussed today, Assassin's Creed Mirage passes the test. Maybe not with flying colors, maybe still with a number of elements taken from Valhalla. It was going to be its DLC after all, but it is a very solid experience overall, especially for fans that are missing the experience of playing and feeling like an assassin. So if the whole game proves to be like what I tested, I do believe it's going to be a good game both for longtime fans, as it captures a great deal of the essence of the original games, and even for the more recent ones, because it still retains the approach of the more recent games. But of course, there is way more to discuss about Assassin's Creed Mirage. We have just scratched the surface of all the news, of all the gameplay and info that we are going to bring to you, so keep your eyes out on all of our social media in the coming days. But you won't have to wait that much, as soon, in a couple of hours, we're going to have a live stream at the link you are seeing on screen right now, where you can ask all your burning questions about the game. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in our next video.